We have a neighborhood ash tree that's being taken down. So this is part of what the city is doing in order to counter the onslaught of the emerald ash borer. And it's absolutely heartbreaking.
Do ash trees have a future in Vermont? We're learning more today on Across the Fence.
Hello, Vermont. When I made that video back in October, my neighbor's big, beautiful ash tree was one of the last to be taken down on our street. Today, only one ash tree remains in our entire neighborhood, and it's the one directly in front of my house, which we paid to have treated. So I am very glad to have an expert in the studio with me today to learn more about the emerald ash borer infestation and what it means for the future of ash trees, not just in Vermont, but all over the country. My guest today is Joanna Garton. Joanne is the community forester with the Vermont Urban and Community Forestry Program, part of Vermont Forests, Parks, and Recreation. Joanna Garton, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am really glad to have you here. Obviously, this is something I care a lot about. Obviously, this is something you care a lot about. Can we just start by talking about how beautiful ash trees are?
I would love to.
Okay.
So what we were seeing in the video there was a green ash, which is one of 3 native species of ash here in this part of the country and part of the region. And they're, like all trees, they're really remarkable. They're remarkable in how they turn carbon dioxide into oxygen, provide wildlife habitat, food, shade, manage stormwater, you know, all these things that are very tangible ecosystem benefits and services, but also these kind of less tangible things like beauty and sense of connection to the natural world, even right in our downtowns and urban centers.
Of course, they're also in our forests.
They are also in our forested areas, particularly in the Champlain Valley and the Connecticut River Valley. You'll find a lot of green ash. White ash is another very common tree throughout the region, and those are found often more in upland forests, but very common. And you likely, if we were to walk outside here, we would find some out there. And lastly, black ash, also called brown ash. That's another native species that you'll find in really wet areas, seepage forests and forested wetlands.
Ash trees were one of the first trees that I ever learned how to identify because they have such distinctive bark.
They do.
But also because I'm a cook, and so for morel harvesting, that it's like one of the signifying trees. When you're looking for morels, you look for the ash trees, and then that kind of, it's a very high likelihood that that's a place where you might find morels if you're going to find them.
Yes, I mean, you're touching on a huge discussion about the interconnectedness of everything in nature.
Which is why we care so much about trees. Okay, so let's talk then now about the villain of our story. So the emerald ash borer. So it's not a native species to the United States. How did it get here?
So the emerald ash borer is an introduced insect. It was brought to North America likely in the 90s-ish, where it is native in Eastern Asia. It is a perfectly happy co-evolved insect that evolved with all the other tree species there, and ash trees in that region have a native resistance and tolerance to emerald ash borer. And emerald ash borer also needs the ash trees to live. So it's reciprocal. And because the insect was brought over to North America and introduced all of a sudden by people, likely brought over in packaging material or some kind of ash wood that had these larvae that could emerge from the ash, it was just suddenly present in a whole part of the planet where trees hadn't co-evolved with the insect. So it has actually, caused a lot it damage to native ash trees, but not with its own malintent or anything. It is simply surviving.
So now I feel bad
here.
about calling it a villain. It's not a villain in and of itself. It's just it's not here. Our trees do not have the defenses to be able to resist. Okay.
Yeah.
And so how quickly did foresters know that here this was going to be basically a catastrophe?
Great question. So at first, as far as I have heard, and this was before I was studying the field too much, all sorts of foresters, arborists, anyone who's sort of looking at trees noticed ash trees dying in the Detroit area. That was where the insect was first introduced.
Like 2002.
2002 is when it was confirmed, so it had likely been there for a few years. And folks didn't really know why, and it took quite a bit of research to finally pin down what was happening and to understand where this insect came from and was brought over to North America. On its own, a female emerald ash borer will only fly maximum about 2 miles, maximum. If there's an ash tree there and it's alive, the emerald ash borer is quite happy staying where it is. But of course, people have transported firewood, ash nursery stock, ash packaging material, and transported the larvae off to a new location where it turns, pupates into an adult and flies off into its next habitat.
And it's the larvae actually that we're really concerned about, right? Because when we're talking about how devastating these are to trees and how they succumb, I think it actually has to do, it's not the adult beetles, it's the larvae.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the adult beetles will eat ash leaves, but it's really the larvae that the eggs are laid on the bark, and the larvae are hatching and feeding in the cambium layer of the tree, which is that live circulation of the tree. And it's 1 or 2 or 10 or maybe even tens of emerald ash borer. A tree might survive. It has its own coping mechanisms. But once you get into these heavy infestations, there's essentially all these little cuts in the tree. And
I think we had some photos of those too. And in fact, it's actually seeing those sort of distinctive feeding galleries that is one of the ways that then you can confirm that the tree does have an infestation.
Absolutely. It's the S-shaped, kind of very serpentine feeding galleries that confirm it's emerald ash borer and not another native insect that is also an ash borer, but not this particular one.
Okay, and so you can tell. So partly this is one of the ways we can tell that a tree is infested, right? So here you can see that S pattern in the feeding gallery. But then there are some other symptoms too. What are some other symptoms that would tell you that a tree is infested?
Yes, so finding those galleries, often it means you need a draw knife to take the bark off the tree, or the tree is so infested you're able to slide the bark off itself, and that's kind of a last resort. Generally, you don't want to be taking pieces off trees if you don't have to. Canopy dieback, you might start to see the tree die from the top down. The leaves aren't there that were there last year.
Right, so we see these kind of like these sparse, almost kind of twiggy canopies.
Exactly, from the top down. You might see something called epicormic sprouting, which is the tree trying to send up new branches lower down in the tree.
Okay.
And if the infestation has really traveled all the way down to the base of the tree, you might see these, what's called a D-shaped exit hole. The emerald ash borer, as an adult, burrows its way out. Its back is flat, and then it's curved underneath, and you'll see the actual exit hole of where it got out.
And then there's something else called woodpecker flecking. What is woodpecker flecking?
So woodpeckers are a natural predator of emerald ash borer larvae. It's lunch to them, and they will fleck off a little bit of bark to get to the larvae, a live larvae.
Okay.
And so they're not digging deep into the tree, but more just kind of getting enough of the bark out of the way to snatch that larvae up. So that is a handy natural predator of emerald ash borer, but certainly not enough to really reduce the problem.
So we're not going to be able, we
entirely.
can't just bring in a whole bunch of woodpeckers and take care of the problem that way. But once a tree is infested, is there anything that can be done about it?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So there is up to a certain amount of infestation, seeing about 30% canopy loss. You can treat it with an insecticide, and you mentioned that earlier. And that's generally not you personally. It's usually it's a certified pesticide applicator, and certainly on municipal property, it's always a certified pesticide applicator. Using one of 2 active ingredient pesticides to, it's called systemic injection. So you're drilling holes into the base of the tree per a certain measurement, certain size, done very carefully, and using kind of a vacuum equipment to get this insecticide into the living tissue of the tree, and it kills the larvae.
And so it's pretty effective, because normally the infestation, the tree will die within like 3 to 5 years.
3 to 5 years, very, very fast.
It's very fast. And so if you are doing a treatment on a tree, then you also have to keep up on a regular schedule of treatments. It's not like a one and done.
That's right. So it is an insecticide treatment, and that insecticide will carry on through the living tissue of the tree for 2 and maybe 3 years, and then that treatment needs to happen again. And so if you decide to stop treating that tree, you are allowing it to be susceptible to emerald ash borer. And that might be fine. You might be looking to treat it for 10, 20 years while you grow other trees in that area.
Yep, right. And so what cities are doing, like the common response right now has been a variety of different things. So we're cutting back trees. Some towns are actually doing injections, right, in order to with the insecticides. Who's making decisions about how to manage the infestation?
So we in Vermont knew that emerald ash borer was coming long before it got here, because we were the last state in this entire area to confirm emerald ash borer. All our neighboring states and provinces had confirmed emerald ash borer up to 20 years prior. So we, for better or worse, had a bit of time to learn some lessons from other folks. And our program, the Vermont Urban and Community Forestry Program, began working with municipalities long before emerald ash borer was confirmed in Vermont to say, hey, do you have ash trees? If so, where are they? If so, how big are they?
Yeah.
And once you decide all those, research all that, what do you want to have happen when emerald ash borer comes through? So that's largely an arborist or an arborist team if your municipality has those. Most do not. And beyond that, it's a lot of conservation commissions, tree boards, and tree wardens who are providing their recommendations to their city council or select board.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
And
homegrown effort.
Yeah, well, and speaking of homegrown effort, there are some things that Vermonters can do in order to help slow the spread. Like, for example, like we're going to put up the slide right now for VT invasive, so you can see that there is a little reporting block right down there on the corner. So if you see any signs of infestation is one of the things. What's another important thing people can do in order to help slow the spread? Because we're almost out of time.
Definitely being able to recognize where ash trees are and how healthy or not they are. We're still interested in learning where emerald ash borer isn't. The biggest thing that people can do is not move firewood. Buy your firewood locally and burn it there.
Okay, good. Very last quick question. What kind of a future does this tree have?
That's a good question. I think we're looking at a species in decline right now. And so it's really important first to pay attention, to notice what you love about these trees and what you're going to miss. There are many proactive solutions happening with all kinds of different teams, nonprofits, landowners, private landowners, the state. We're looking at treating some certain stands of trees, particularly black ash trees that are extremely susceptible to emerald ash borer. Seed collection, whether for growing those out immediately in labs to start testing for resistance or sending them away for long-term storage for future researchers to use. We're also doing a small number across, many individuals across the state of black ash splint pounding. So pounding those
really
logs
beautiful.
into splints for future generations to be using for weaving.
Making certain that in some way, shape, or form the ash tree stays a part of our lives.
Exactly.
That's beautiful. Well, for more information about the emerald ash borer, including a link where you can report a suspected infestation, you can check out the website for Vermont Invasives, who does important work monitoring and slowing the spread of EAB and other invasive species. It's there on your screen, vtinvasives.org. To learn more about the Vermont Urban and Community Forestry Program's approach to emerald ash borer management, you can also go to their EAB site. We've provided that website for you there as well. Joanna Garton, thank you so much for joining me today.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful. And as always, thank you, Vermont, for learning and exploring with me today. And thanks to the team that makes Across the Fence possible. I'm Amy Finley. This is Across the Fence. Come back and let's learn and explore again tomorrow.